All right. Good morning and welcome, Tim Horty, to the Coptimizer podcast. This is, again, we're on our early in our journey here, and I really appreciate you taking some time this morning. I know your career is a very, very busy one, and your job is an important one. So we're hoping to maybe share a few lessons and get you back to work here shortly.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be part of your podcast, and I'm hoping that I have a few ideas that we can share with the rest of the world.
Oh, I already know for certain that people are going to get a lot out of this conversation. So again, I appreciate you being here. But before we kick it off, one of the things I just to remind folks, what we're looking to do here is connect with leaders, people that work in positions of law enforcement that are setting the professional course for what we do in policing. And policing is a very misunderstood career. There's a lot of details that are easy to overlook when we're talking, the mainstream media, the average person perception of what it takes to be a police officer. So, when I was thinking about this, I'm like, who better to speak with than the director of the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy to educate us on what it takes to make a police officer. But before we get into that, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and how you landed in that chair.
Yeah, well, that's sometimes a little awkward, but talking about yourself. But, Patrick, I knew in fifth grade I wanted to be a police officer. And I wrote term papers about it in grade school and high school. I had a cousin that was a police officer in Evansville, Indiana. And I always, I just loved it. I worked at a car dealership called Kenny Kent Chevrolet down in Evansville and in high school. And they serviced the city police cars. And they would bring them into the service department under warranty, and the mechanics would fix it, and then we would wash them and send them back. And it was the biggest thrill for me to wash them, take the car out of the wash bay around the block on a city street in a marked police car, but just to come back into the back lot. And it was just it was one of those things where I think, oh my goodness, I'm 18 years old and I'm driving a police car. But then I went to Indiana University and studied. It was called forensic science at the time, forensic studies, but it was police administration. I saw a flyer on campus and it was advertising the Indiana University Police Department, and they called it the cadet program. So I signed up and I got an interview and I got the job. And so the first summer that I was there, between my freshman and sophomore year, we stayed on campus for 3 weeks during the summer and studied just everyday law enforcement, security issues, and so forth. And we were the unarmed security officers for the police department. We worked in the health and physical education building, the musical arts center, and so forth. And then the following summer, we finished our law enforcement training between my sophomore and junior year and became a full-fledged police officer. I was only 20 years old at the time, about to turn 21, but just 20. And I learned that policing in your own community with peers is different. And again, you're 20 years old trying to police 22-year-olds. And we would walk into the dormitories in the evening. We would work dorm patrol, and you'd start like at 5:30 and walk into the dormitory in a uniform. And even people that knew who you were, they didn't recognize you in a uniform. And you could feel the stares, even back in the 70s, of, who is this young cop here in our world? And so I graduated college. I stayed and got a master's degree in education because I always thought I would like to be a trainer in a law enforcement agency. I left. I went back home and lived with my mom and dad in their basement for between May and January of 1980. And in January of 1981, I applied to the Indianapolis Police Department, got a job. Knew 3 people, maybe 5 in the whole city of Indianapolis. I had a college roommate that we became roommates here in Indianapolis. I knew one way to get from our apartment at 86 and Ditch Road back downtown to our academy. But again, I felt like this is my second academy, but joining into the large world of law enforcement at the Indianapolis Police Department, it was a big deal. And frankly, I was a I was a young middle class kid coming from a Catholic grade school and private Catholic high school to come to Indiana University where there was 35,000 people, and then come to Indianapolis where there's almost 1 million people. It was a culture shock to me, but I wouldn't exchange the experience for anything. And I think it made me a better person. I've lived in Indianapolis since then. I met my wife. We've raised 2 boys. We have 2 grandkids. And so Indianapolis has been good to me. And I feel like I hopefully gave as much as I got in return from that experience. But again, a long 45-year law enforcement journey, but here I am. And again, it's a great opportunity. So I left the Indianapolis Police Department when the merger happened in 2007. That was a tumultuous time. And I left and went to the United States Attorney's Office. Susan Brooks was U.S. Attorney at the time. She and I were friends, and she encouraged me to apply. And I got the job as a law enforcement coordinator doing training for the U.S. Attorney's Office for law enforcement. And as well, I became the public affairs officer at the U.S. Attorney's Office, writing press releases and helping with being the spokesperson for the office. And then in 2018, I was approached. There was an opening here at the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. I felt like I had a little more battery life left, and I thought, why not? So I got a 4-year contract to come here. Again, I had a background in education. I worked at the Indianapolis Police Training Academy for 4 years as a sergeant. And I felt like maybe I had something to offer, and apparently the board thought so as well. But this has, without a doubt, been the most rewarding job I have ever had. Now, when you're 22, 3 years old and you're a police officer and you're walking into a new world, it's as exciting as can be. But as you mature and you get a little older and recognize what is or what isn't important, I feel like now I have an opportunity to impact more people than I did as a police officer. We have 148 young officers in this recruit school right now. They're a week in. This is Thursday. They started Monday, and they are struggling, but it's the way it always works, right? For the first couple of days or weeks until we get used to it. But it's a very rewarding position, and these young men and women really keep you balanced, keep you feeling young, and keep you on your toes, because it sounds a bit philosophical, but the training that we give them is completely dependent on how safe they might be out there on the street. So it's an exciting time for me, and I hope that with the staff that we have here, we are giving these young men and women the skills that they need to go back to their communities and be 2022 rated police officers and understand what their communities are expecting of them.
All right. Well, that was a lot. We just went through your whole career. So I'm going to back you up just a minute, because you said a couple of things in there that I think are fascinating. As a 20-year-old college student, you're given the responsibility of becoming a full-fledged police officer. And oftentimes, when we're young, we think we know everything, right? You get a little time under your belt, and maybe you see the world a little bit differently. But what was that experience like? I know you touched on it just a little bit, but what was that as a 20-year-old? Now you've got that responsibility of, wow, I can arrest somebody if I need to. I'm carrying a firearm on my person. I'm responsible for the protection of my university and my fellow students. So what was that like?
Yeah, it was inspiring and overwhelming at the same time. And to be honest, the first time I think that I really understood the gravity of this position was when I walked into the cafeteria at Briscoe Quad at Indiana University. And I had been around these people for, many, many months. And I walked in, and people that I knew looked at me like, I think I recognize you, but I'm not sure. And so you realize that the gravity of it all. And I thought to myself, I'm here and responsible for protecting all these people. And it was long before the what we know of the active shooter coming into a cafeteria, but it was real then. It's a possibility, or a bomb or a fire. And the inspiration that kind of, this is my group of folks, at least today, on this shift, on this day, they are my responsibility. And I felt it was inspiring to know that if the bell was rung, figuratively, they would look to me like, Mr. Officer, what do we do? And so it was an exciting time, daunting, and I had never shot a pistol in my whole life. I'd shot shotguns, and my dad would take me out on Thanksgiving Day, and we'd shoot a .22 rifle at cans, but I'd never shot a pistol in my whole life. And I was pretty good at it. And how did this happen? So it all worked out. But it was just, the fact that I'm the person in charge if something turns sour, and if some kind of legal action needs to be taken, I've been trained, and I think I'm pretty confident I can figure it out.
Well, we have something in common there in that we both work, or at some point have worked in cities and towns that have Big Ten universities, which is, I think policing in a campus environment it presents a lot of its own challenges. But yeah, the student patrol, it's an important job. And then to actually progress to the point where you're a sworn officer and you have all those responsibilities, it's a unique model. It's not one that's that's, I think, used prolifically in the U.S. for training young officers. But yeah, we love that program. When as a chief, and when you're looking and you're recruiting people that have made it through that long format program, generally tend to come with a pretty good understanding of what the job entails and that responsibility that it carries, and a little bit of seasoning under their belt. Because there's a big argument that you hear that goes around in the circles of law enforcement, that who makes the best police officers? Is it a college graduate? Is it, do you need to have an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree or more? Is it a military veteran? Is it neither? And I think in my experiences, I found that it's none of the above and all of the above at the same time. And it really is it comes down to the person and what they're willing to invest in themselves to become a professional police officer.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I've asked myself that a lot. I got the opportunity to take promotion tests at the Indianapolis Police Department earlier than some because I had a college degree, and it worked out for me. There were some that said, that kid, he's still wet behind the ears. He has no right right to do that. And again, I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's like a team. I mean, you don't have a whole team of quarterbacks. You don't have a whole team of ends or guards or tackles. And it is sort of like scooping your hand into the Jelly Belly bowl. I mean, you get a little bit of everything, and then you just throw them in your mouth and chew them all up. And I think it's just the overall experience. So like anything in life, it's about all the team members that you have that it is best for one job or responsibility. And that's part of the problem. And we'll probably get into this in a bit, but the difficulty of recruiting these young men and women. Now, you want someone who is tough enough and burly enough to go into the bar fight with you and not get yourself killed, but yet you want someone who is diplomatic enough to interview the rape victim or the child abuse victim. And that bandwidth is hard to find in one person. And it doesn't happen very often. I mean, I worked with guys that, you get a, fight in progress at the local bar. You think, okay, I hope so-and-so is going with me. But when you want to have a cookout the next weekend, you don't want that guy there. You wouldn't leave him alone with your dog because he's just that person. So, everybody's got a role in life. Everyone's got a stage in life on which they perform. And I use the example all the time. You're walking down the mall and you see your plumber, and you give him hello and then you move on, but he's not important to you at that point. But when you're knee deep in sewer water in your bathroom at 2 a.m, he's the most important person on the planet to you when he's in your living room. So, everybody's got a time, a theater, a stage on which they perform. And I think that's part of the secret of life, that everybody, if everybody does their part, if everybody stays in their lane, I think the world would be a lot better place.
Well, we just solved the world's problem right there.
There you go.
I appreciate it.
There you go.
So with in your career with the Indianapolis Police Department, what are some of the highlights there, and maybe some of the biggest challenges and opportunities that you had in that part of your journey?
The beauty of working in a large police department like the Indianapolis Police Department is that I had so many different opportunities, and I didn't even touch half of them. But I started out working the street, which is where I think everybody belongs. And then I got the opportunity to go into the vice branch and work commercial sex and gambling investigations, which was great fun. But yet, we kind of keep the moral character of the city in check. I got promoted and went to become a sergeant in the training academy. Then I got promoted and went to the street. I went to the horse patrol. I'll never forget, the operations deputy chief called me in and says, "Horty, we need you to be in charge of the horse patrol." And I learned everything I know about horses in Boy Scout camp, and that was about a week. And he said, "I know." So I learned to ride a horse, because I think it's important that if you're in charge of the horse patrol, that you learn to ride horses. Or if you're in charge of the drones, you got to, learn how to drive a drone. So that was great fun, and riding the horse downtown. And then they asked me to become the public affairs officer, and that, frankly, was probably the most defining moment in my police career, to be able to see the big overall picture of what's going on. You didn't investigate murders, but you talked about them all the time. You didn't write the policy, but you talked about the policy. And you weren't the one out there taking radio runs and why an officer used deadly force, but yet you read the report and you knew how it all operated. And I was there for 3 different police chiefs, and that's part of my boastfulness, in that somebody hires you and thinks that you share the same values that they have, and then the next person keeps you, and then the next person keeps you. And that to me was so flattering, that I would go through 3 different chiefs over the period of time. And my wife and I were at the state fair one year, just walking around, eating corn on the cob and so forth. And I had a elderly lady walk up to me, and she says, "Honey, you're that guy I see on TV all the time." "Yes, ma'am, I am." She says, "Your name's Horty, right?" "Yes, ma'am." She says, "I like watching you because I always know I'm going to get the truth. I'm going to get the straight story." And I thought to myself, in the PIO world, what more flattering a remark could someone say? Now, quite often you were delivering ugly, ugly news. Officers are getting in trouble, or, you will report a fatality accident. But I think people can manage the drama of life's issues that come, so long as you tell them the truth, that it's timely and it's sincere. And that, to me, was the most exciting part of that job, and it just worked out. Then I got promoted. I became a deputy chief on the east side of town, on the East District. Then things changed, and I went back downtown on a walking beat on the day shift downtown. That was great fun. It was sort of a demotion, but that's what happens when you take appointed positions. They're political, and you have to be tall when you walk in, and you've got to be strong when you walk out, and recognize that whether you did something good or bad, it's just someone else's turn. And then I got the chance to become a deputy chief on the West District. It was Hallville and Stringtown and some really challenging neighborhoods. And it was the height of community policing. And in your police world, you're taught to take charge, and the police are responsible for what's going on. And the community policing, that wasn't the way that things worked. You had to listen to people in your community, and they had a voice, and that was new to me. But Jerry Barker was the chief then. He had the West District. He became the chief. He gave me the responsibility. And again, learning to work with the community was again daunting and fascinating and humbling. I mean, oh my gosh, it's humbling. because people have a voice, and that isn't the way you were raised as a police officer. Take charge and make things happen. But so I spent the remainder of my career there, and that was a very exciting time, and I loved being out there on the west side working with those folks.
Well, that's also a tremendous amount of responsibility, and I think that's something that I just want to maybe touch on for a few moments, because I spent the last 10 years of my career as a chief, and I used to get that question all the time. What's it like being the chief of police? And I had a formulated response that I would use in many situations. It's like the way that I viewed it. It was like, well, being a chief is like being one decision away from being a patrol officer again, being a lieutenant again, and the decision might not even be mine. It might not even have anything to do with something that I did personally, but that's the responsibility that you take on. And every city, the merit rules are a little different. Not all agencies are merit agencies, so there's a lot of nuances in the way that police departments are set up. Huge differences, right? You were part of the largest police department in our state here in Indiana, but most people sometimes fail to recognize that 80% of police departments are 20 officers or less. They're smaller, much more intimate, coming from very, very small communities. And I think especially with the advent of social media and digital media in this information age, and you as having spent that so much time as a PIO, you probably appreciate this more than anything. It's just that the information is really coming at people in ways that sometimes I think we're still, as a society, we're still adjusting to, and that is that can create a lot of pressure, and it can create the expectations, trying to manage those expectations. So not only do you have the policing side of you where you're where you have to do the right things, where one mistake can be fatal. One wrong decision can lead to very bad outcomes. So the pressure to perform is there on every call that you go to. So you made a comment a little bit earlier that you felt like you still had a little battery life left. And I think maybe, again, people don't appreciate how rare that really is for a police officer to be able to still be thriving later in life, because the stress and the accumulation of stress on this job really takes its toll physically and emotionally on people. So that's one of the things that we really kind of wanted to touch on today was, what is it, what do you think maybe you've done personally, or maybe it's things that you've done to help manage that along the way that has helped lead you to be successful in all these stages of your career, not just at one point, but that's a pretty impressive run that you've had, and you're still rolling.
Yeah, well, it's all relative, but I am blessed, and I think first I was blessed with parents that were healthy, and I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and we were taught to exercise, be outside. I mean, you knew what season it was by the color and the size of the ball that was in your hand, and you were able to stay out late until the street lights came on, and you just came back home to eat dinner and go back out. But I think a big part of that is your faith, that you have to keep a strong faith. If you don't, when things really turn rocky, there's nobody to turn it over to. You eat it all. You eat it every day. You go to sleep with it. You wake up with it. But if you have a faith, and it doesn't have to be Catholic or Protestant or even Christian, I mean, you name it, so long as you have a higher being, I think it's super important. And then I think you have to have a group of people that support you, and you have the ability to talk. And I have a lot of police friends. I really do. But the majority of my friends are outside of law enforcement. I go to church with them. I hunt with them. I work out with them. I sort of have these certain groups of people that I hang out with, and each of them, my hunting buddies, we don't go out to dinner very often, and my church buddies, I don't go hunting with. So I think it's important to keep a group of friends that are different than you, at least in your profession, so that you have some way to bounce off ideas. And if you're thinking this way and you talk to them at dinner and they look at you like you're crazy, you think, well, maybe I'm the one that's off. And then, I mean, I do some kind of workout every single day, and I miss occasionally, of course, but I mean, there's days I lay in bed and think, nah, I don't want to get up, but I'm so angry at myself the rest of the day if I don't, because I've just got lazy. So, I mean, I go to a gym downtown. I go to the natatorium. I swim one day a week. I run. I have a bicycling group, and I use exercise bands to work out with. And so I think it's important that you stay healthy. And I think that's part of what happens with COVID. I have seen tons of folks that I knew personally that died, but for the most part, they weren't healthy to begin with. And I'm not indicting them. I'm not beating them up. I'm just saying I don't know that I've ever had COVID, but I felt like it. I've never been tested, but I'm pretty sure I probably did, but I fought it off. So I think it's your faith. It's having friends outside the police department, and having physical fitness part of your day, and then just outside interest. I have a wood shop in my 2-car garage, and I go out there, and we call it making sawdust, and it's just my way of getting away and hunting and fishing and camping with my kids and grandkids. It's all part of, I think, staying well-rounded in what you're doing, and it allows you to be able to manage the stress of the everyday life. Because frankly, and I don't say it boastfully, but when you work in these leadership positions, when you go home, you put the phone on the charger, but it's still on ring, and you still have to listen, and you still get emails, and frankly, people expect you to respond at 8:00 at night, and I don't really care to do it, but it's part of the job. And so when they text you, when you get an email, people expect you to respond. And I think in today's world of social media, and even the cell phones that we have, you could go around the world and you still have access, and you can text someone in 2 seconds. The text information goes back and forth. So you have to turn it off, but you also have to recognize that when something happens, if the fire alarm goes off here at 2 a.m, to say I'm not available, or I'm not at work right now, I'll call somebody else, doesn't work.
Yeah, that is, again, a lot of great information right there. And if I could, wellness, has been near and dear to me for a long time. In a lot of ways, I kind of stumbled into some of the information. I was very fortunate early in my career to recognize that the career of policing itself can be very damaging to your health if you don't take steps to manage and mitigate it. And unmanaged, unmitigated, very poor. And the national statistics will show that the average lifespan of a police officer is anywhere from 18 to 23 years below the national average. And you touched on a lot of those things. A lot of that stems from insulin resistance, which creates a lot of inflammation. It's a process that it doesn't happen in a day, but it's that slow drip, and it can catch up to you in a hurry if you don't have a plan and a strategy to mitigate it. And to hear you say, I exercise every day. I've got my buckets where I have my relationships. These are all for any leader that's listening to this podcast. Sometimes people just look for the perfect plan. They're looking for someone to tell them exactly what to do, and it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. And as we go through the different podcasts in this series, these are some of the experts that we're going to talk about. Well, how do I manage my insulin resistance? How do I create relationships outside of policing, and how do I manage that? How do I maintain a high level of faith when I'm working in an environment that is very, very challenging? And I was very fortunate, to have, a 2-parent home, also raised Catholic. My dad was a Korean War veteran, and he always had a way of keeping things in perspective, without ever he never talked about his experiences. And I was just talking about this with a friend recently, but whenever I would kind of complain to him about how tough things were, or, I was having a bad day, he was always someone that I knew would listen, but he was also someone that would just say, hey, look, he had a saying, is if you think you're having a bad day, try missing one. And I never really understood what he was getting at, until I got a little bit older in life. And it's like, yeah, it could definitely be worse, right? I'm still alive. I'm here. I'm still in the fight. So I can't feel sorry for myself. I got to get out there and get after it, and just keep pushing forward. So now that you're on the back end of an amazing career, you've got some tremendous experience, tremendous perspective, and now you're put in this role where we're going to develop and mentor the next generation of police officers. And not only are we going to do that, but we're probably doing it in maybe the most challenging environment that policing has ever faced, because of the advent of digital information, and I would even go back to say, the mid 90s to late 90s, when 24-hour news networks really started to become prolific and those channels started to build. You got to fill that stuff. There has to be content there, and people have to want to watch it. That's how they generate revenue. That's how they generate interest. And since the beginning of policing has always been one of the most fascinating and interesting things that people are, they want to watch. They want to see how the serial killers are how they're captured. What happens when, heck, you can even go back to the old Wild West, right? In the early days of law enforcement, a lot of changes, but I would say one of the more concerning things in the last, really since in the post-Ferguson days, where you really kind of started to see a shift where, when I was looking for a job in the 90s, I came out of the military, went to Purdue, got my degree. Back then, it was very difficult to get a job. It didn't matter if it was a small department, a big department. I remember taking a test. I drove down to Cincinnati to take the written test for the Cincinnati Police Department, and there were like 2,000 people in the room taking the test. And everywhere you went, that's what you saw. Even here in the city of Lafayette, the 200-300 applications for every one opening that you had. And now we're not seeing that. We're lucky if we're getting 5 applications for every one opening that we have, and you got to work really hard. And some of the things that I think are concerning about that are, number one, internally, I think people in the profession have, taken this perspective that, man, this is it's a difficult environment. It's tough on me. I've firsthand experienced the challenges of what this is. It's hard, it's hard to go out and manage other people's problems all day and then not have them impact your own life. But there are ways that you can do it. But nowadays we've seen, if you did surveys, and I know there has been some informal surveys that have been done, but it'd be nice to see a little bit of research done in this area, in that, why don't we have the same level of enthusiasm inside the profession for passing that baton on to people in our own families? Because if I, as a chief and as a career police officer, if I'm unwilling or really just don't feel comfortable telling my own children to enter into this profession, why should I expect, what right do I have to tell other parents that they should let their kids come into this profession?
No, you're right. It is a difficult time, and I think it's it's the perfect storm as to why we can't recruit. I was the same way. I applied for the Illinois State Police before I got the Indianapolis job, and there were maybe not thousands, but there were hundreds of men and women that were applying for the job. Back to your 24-hour news cycle, the problem is that 24-hour cycle has to be filled, and police news is easy. I mean, it's not real hard journalism in my mind, and I'm not beating up any of the TV stations. It's just most all police departments have a PIO or someone that's willing to talk. And I was watching the news last night. I'm laying in bed, and I'm not teasing you. The first 10, 12 minutes were about murders and violence and who knows what. And I think at some point people just get tired of listening to that. I do. I want to give me the feel-good story. Then I've been in the business for a while. So the dilemma for us here at ILEA is that you only have 5 men or women applying for 2 spots at the Lafayette Police Department, but you need both those spots filled. So you take the best candidate that you could get. Now, the other side of it is maybe these are, better quality candidates because they're really driven if they want to be in law enforcement. But when we whittle down that list, it's you get 20 people apply, 5 don't show, 2 can't pass the background, 3 can't pass the drug screen, 1 can't pass the physical fitness, and then the mental, and then you're left with 3 people. So how does that all work? But here at ILEA, we still have the same number of people that we're going to train. So that FTE, that full-time equivalent position gets trained 5 or 6 times over a 20-year period, because where Pat Flannelly would come, get trained once at ILEA and spend 20, 25 years at Lafayette PD. Now these folks are being disenchanted or for whatever reason resigning, and I have to fill that spot 5 or 6 times over a 20-year period. And then that puts us, beyond our capacity sometimes. But I feel comfortable with this new generation of police officer that is coming to us. I think they have the same fire in their belly to do good things, to do good things in their community, to be the public servant. They just seem to get bored with it. And if I don't get promoted in the first 6 months and I'm not investigating murders, I'm bored. And so I tell our staff all the time, me included, sometimes we grumble about these millennials or Gen Xers. They are our client. They are our student. And we've got to find a way to meet them where they are. And we can say all day long that, they're not getting it because that's the way we've always taught it. Well, it's not the Marine Corps 1975 anymore, but there's still got to be a balance. And I think discipline's important. And I'm not saying, you got to run 20 miles because you forgot your homework assignment. But I think discipline, and it is not about push-ups and burpees and doing research papers for punishment. It's about developing the same discipline that you need to learn your skill, to be physically fit. And I told these young men and women the very first day they were here, this academy should be equally difficult for every single person here, because if you can run a 4-minute mile, that's great, but you should be striving to run a 3-minute 45-second mile. And so you should invest the same amount of effort. And so if you can lift weights, then you should get stronger. You should get better. And if you're a whiz in the classroom and getting an 85% without even studying is okay, that's not okay. So you should be spending the same amount of time that it took the kids struggling to get a 75 as you are to get a 95 or 100%. So I ask them to stay involved. I ask them to make this a participatory experience. Don't just sit back and let this come to you. These are skills that you're going to be using in your trade the rest of your career. And it might keep you safe. It might keep you alive. It might keep you out of federal court. It might keep your constituency happy. It might just make you a better investigator. So learn the things that we're teaching. Do we have the corner on the law enforcement training market? Of course not. But I think we're doing a lot of good things. I really do. We need to get more involved in scenario-based training. We can talk about that more in a little bit. We're building a new facility that will have a scenario-based training, reality-based training. We're building a new Evo track because, these young men and women, we're killing ourselves in traffic-related accidents more times than not. And if you look statistically in Indiana, it's the #1 killer of police officers. It's not getting ambushed. It's not getting shot, although those grab the attention. But we're driving these cars too fast. These Chargers will go 140 miles an hour in a minute, and I mean in seconds, and it's scary. So getting to a run safely, wearing your seatbelt, wearing your ballistic vest, those are all things that keep you safe. So that's what keeps me awake at night is, are we doing everything that we can to give these young men and women the skills, the tools that it takes to make them as safe as they can be? There are some times where no matter what you do, God just has a plan for you. Noah Chanovez from Elwood, everything that we are hearing, he was just ambushed and hadn't even gotten out of his seatbelt yet. So sometimes it's just your time, and I'm not trying to dismiss it. It's important, but what you can do is control what you can control, and you can't control the outcome all the time, but you can control the means to get there. And that's what we're trying to teach these young men and women: scenario-based training, de-escalation techniques. We want them, one, to show up. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Just be safe, and then be healthy, and then have food, and be warm and shelter. Show up. That's the first order of business. And then be kind and polite and look the part. Then be smart and be able to talk with people. And that is a big part of what we try to develop. And again, I'm not saying that this generation can't. It's just they are of a texting generation. They are of an email generation, and they can bang away on that keyboard faster than I can think. But they don't communicate very well as a rule, as a gross generalization. And so the first scenario we have is just, there is a distraught man or woman on the sidewalk. They probably have mental illness. That's the way the scenario is built. But we don't expect them to know officer safety skills. I don't expect them to know even how to handcuff them. I just want to know if they can talk with this person. Hi, I'm Officer Horty from the ILEA Police Department. I see you're standing here, with no clothes on, and it looks like you're struggling. How can I help? I'm here to help you. And our instinct in the past has been, this guy's crazy. Let's go lock him up. Let's put him in jail for a mental charge, and then take him to Wishart Hospital, where I came from, Eskenazi now, or wherever the mental health. And that isn't the way we do business now. And we have a different business model. But I think that the idea of police work is be a public servant. I tell the recruits at graduation, treat every person like they were ladies and gentlemen, not because they are, but because you are. And so if you can treat people with dignity and respect, I think that's all they want from you. You can't fix their mental illness. You can't diagnose it. You can't put a handful of Prozac tablets in their mouth and they become okay and undepressed all of a sudden. So, you can only control what you can control in the short run, and giving them the tools to do that, to talk with people, is important. But, and I'm not trying to skip over, but we teach them the softer skills, but yet you have to teach them the hard skills too, because when the bell rings and the fight's on and they're looking down the business end of a gun, they have to know how to take cover, how to use their firearm, have to use physical tactics. And that part of law enforcement, frankly, is ugly. And with the invention of body cams now, people see that. And we tease all the time that people don't want to know how the sausage is made. They just want to have the sausage, right? They don't want to see how we use deadly force, because, a gun coming out of a holster and 3 rounds placed right here, it doesn't look nice. It doesn't look good, but that's part of what we have to do. So that goes back to the breadth that these young officers have to have. They have to be able to talk with people, be kind, be public servants, but yet when the bell rings and we use the term warrior quite often, and at that point in a deadly force situation, all bets are off. The only thing that is your goal is to win the fight, or at least not lose the fight. And so go home at night. It has become a cliche, but it's true. but only when it becomes this, situation where if I don't do something now, I'm going to get my brains beat out and someone's going to steal my gun. They're going to shoot me. And I've got a widow and 3 kids at home. Now, what do I do?
Yeah. And that's there's the warrior, the guardian discussion. I think, quite frankly, I think sometimes people just grab on to certain words that they want to push a narrative. And I have a lot of discussions in our police citizens academies and others where we would talk about the warrior cop, and a lot of that, I think stems from a book that a New York Times author wrote a few years back. But there are times where you absolutely have to be a warrior, because it's not just your life that you're defending. It's the lives of innocents, and that's our number one cause, is to be able to protect the innocent. And in order to do that, sometimes you can't be just a guardian. You have to be a warrior. And when we have the time and we have the resources, which was kind of where I wanted to go next, you mentioned it, we can do these things and we can do them very effectively. But it's not something that happens overnight, and it all depends on where people are coming from. This generation, I agree wholeheartedly. One of some of the most empathetic, compassionate, hardworking people that I've seen. They're there, and a lot of them are willing to do the job. And I think now, as a society and really as a profession, one of the things that is important for us is to show them that we can prepare them to be successful in these very difficult environments. And not only that once they get there and once they experience some of this, if we can support them the right way, they will begin to feel what it means to be a public safety officer, a public servant, and the joy and the satisfaction that you can get from knowing that you have had an impact in someone else's life. Because there's not too many careers where you can really impact people in the ways that we can in policing. So, with that in mind, in the post George Floyd era, we, sometimes, we get these whiplash reactions, very emotional times, and we make decisions that sometimes they're ideological, sometimes they're political. And what I always would ask people is just take a step back and ask, what are the outcomes that you're looking for? What is it that you want to see in your police? And now what are you willing to invest in your police in order to develop the professional police officers that can give you those results? And so in the concept of defunding it was very infuriating to me. And again, I really kind of had to do a lot of reflection myself. I was, okay, well, how do we get people to understand that that's the worst thing that we can possibly do? If you want to have that professional police force, you have to be willing to invest in the people. That requires a significant amount of training. It requires the equipment that's necessary. It requires the community engagement and all of the umbrella services and everything that come along with it. But most importantly, and you touched on it, was that you have to develop in the young officer the mindset that every day is an opportunity for me to learn something new, and I have to prove myself every day. I have to be a lifelong learner. There is never an end to this journey. Tomorrow is a new beginning. I can take all my experiences, all my knowledge, everything that I've accumulated up until yesterday, learn something new today, and then apply all of that tomorrow. And the challenge for you, and again, I was very privileged to spend a couple of years on the law enforcement training board and got to see firsthand, the challenges that you have in the academy environment. Is it requires investment, and I think fortunately we've had, I think, the right people recognize that that's what's needed. And at the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy, in your case, you are investing in your facilities, and maybe just touch on some of the things that you're doing there, and what you're looking to build for the future to set up the future of policing, so we can minimize some of these tragedies and build a better police officer moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I heard a quote the other day that we learn to read and then we read to learn. And the hypothesis was our third graders in Indiana are not where they need to be in the learning curve. And so if you're behind in third grade, then you're behind in fifth grade, eighth grade, and so forth. The point is that if we're unhappy with the way law enforcement is being delivered today, then don't defund them and throw them to the wolves. You got to invest, and the way that we get out of poverty as children and adults is to get a job, to get an education, and move up. And that is part of our dilemma here at the Academy. This is a basic class, 16 weeks. That's all the longer that we are doing it, at least at this point. Could it be longer? Yes, but I get at some point this is the basic training. And then to your point, you have to learn something every day. So part of what we're trying to do here at the Academy is build a facility that revolves around a new model. And we have to get away from a lecture format where we give them a week or two's worth of classes, that we give them a written test. They get at least 75, 80, 85% on the test. And then we assume that learning took place. And then we further assume that learning that did take place continues on to graduation and then on to their career. So what I'm trying to do is break the classes down into smaller groups where we have a better recipe for the curriculum. You do the same thing each time, freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. With limited facilities, half the group has to go to firearms and half the group has to go to make traffic stops, but they haven't had the cross training yet. So I want to develop smaller classes. I want to develop a scenario-based training village. It's going to look like a strip mall. We'll have a tattoo parlor and a CVS pharmacy kind of location, and a grocery stores and so forth that mimic an actual a scenario where these young men and women will go to. We're going to build a mock courtroom where they're actually hands-on doing the court testimony. I read a book recently. It was called Make It Stick, and it talked about the science of everyday adult learning. And the hypothesis was we can't just do pen and pencil tests anymore and assume that the learning took place, assume that the learning was good, and assume the learning continues on. So adults learn better with hands-on, and you teach a little and you practice a little. You teach some more, you practice some more, and that's what we're doing now. We're involving our scenario-based training with de-escalation, with vignettes that break them down, and they build on one another. We don't expect them to do physical tactics on the first day, but we expect them, to the earlier point, of at least talk with people. So we're putting 3 young men and women to a dormitory. With COVID, we're finding that it's just too compact. That's not how people want to live. So we're building new dormitories. We're building a new emergency vehicle operations track. Again, we mentioned it's the #1 killer of police officers, and it's the only track in the whole state. So we can do mock scenarios where they're in a pursuit. They park the car, they get out and have a foot pursuit. Then they use their physical tactics skills, and then they run into the scenario-based training village to use as a mock barricaded subject. So then we make them write a report, and then they go testify about it in court. So again, the idea is to put all this into place where they can build on what they learned the day before and make sure the recipe is followed, for the most part, the same way each time. And I, Patrick, I believe with all my heart, we as a law enforcement profession in the whole country, we're doing a pretty good job of training these young men and women, and it's evolving every day. It's not the same as when you and I came on, but it wasn't the same to our trainers. I remember in 1981 when I came on, my FTO, hey, rookie, you think you're the new breed. And I mean, that was 40 years ago. And so I was the new breed then, as were you, and the new breed are here in 2022. So we get frustrated because, it's not the way we did it. Well, what about our lives is the way that we used to? The shade tree mechanic that used to be able to change the oil, you can't get under the car, and I can't find the oil filter. You can order groceries online. I mean, I want to pick out my own bananas and go to Kroger and get it. But again, I'm old school. I got the newspaper. I bring the hard newspaper to work every day. And why don't you get it online? I got cash in my wallet instead of my credit card. So I don't think we're doing it wrong. I just think there's got to be a balance. There's a sweet spot between the old and the new. And the way we've always done it can't be the necessary default. Although I do believe, I believe that we are doing good work. I mean, we're teaching these young men and women how to do things that they need, skills, but I think we could always do it better. And that, I think that's the secret to life, right? To get better at everything that we do, get more efficient. And change is hard for people, but for the most part, it's good. It's because we can't tolerate the way it was. We get more efficient, or frankly, our society just says, I'm not tolerating that anymore. You cannot kneel on a man's neck for 9 minutes in front of the world with 3 other police officers standing there and expect us to sit still for that. It isn't going to happen. But change, I mean, I think we all panic over change sometime, and we got to get away from that. And change for the sake of change, it's hooey. But good change is worth looking at. And I think that's the secret. At least look at it, give it some thought, use data to support your decisions, and use the educational folks that we have access to. We know for the most part how to deploy our men and women, that there's more runs in the evening than there is at 2 a.m. So we have more off, but use data to support all of that. And I think that's the secret to life is to support your decision and think less with your heart and more with your head, but you still always have to be smarter than the rules, right? I mean, because the rule says you can't transport anyone under the age of 10 in your car without a car seat. Well, if it's pouring rain and mom and dad just had a crash, they're on the way to the hospital, and you need to take this youngster to auntie's house. Well, put them in the car and strap them in and go. Now, is it a violation of policy? Of course it is. But sometimes, again, you got to be smarter than the rules and make things happen.
Yeah. And you got to be able to control yourself and control your emotions. And you touched on a few of the things that I wanted to close on, because we chatted a little bit before we got on this podcast, and I knew this could easily be, we could talk for a week on all of these things, but we're going to try to keep this down to an hour, and we're coming right up on that hour. So I want to respect your time. But a few things I did want to maybe comment on. You mentioned the George Floyd case, and I think for police officers all over the country, we look at these things from an insider's perspective, and it's very difficult to watch something like that when that there were a lot of different things that officer could have done. And the tragic thing about that is that it wasn't just that Derek Chauvin, one officer. It's a tragedy that what happens to George Floyd, in that case, the victim, but it's also a tragedy for that community, for the other officers that are there. Some of them brand new, they're rookie police officers, and they haven't even had the opportunity yet to experience life on the street. So to get a little bit of time under their belt, to get seasoned a little bit. But that's the reality of the job, and that's one of the things that we teach officers from day one, whether it's internally here at our police departments, or whether it's in the academy setting, that you're responsible for the decisions that you make, and quite frankly, more importantly, you're responsible sometimes for the decisions you don't make. And now life is a stage. The whole world is your stage with that body camera and other things, and that everyone gets to see your performance. So that's where we really want to emphasize that, it's not just about looking good on camera. It's about doing the right thing, and to be well prepared and be well trained. And, the challenge for you in an academy environment, and this is again, something that I think maybe people in society at large don't necessarily understand, this is that we have very high expectations for our police officers. And it's, we've tasked our academies with a tremendous amount of responsibility to do that in a 16-week period. And I think we do an outstanding job. And I do think that we prepare officers well for what they're going to experience. But it's a baseline. You don't send someone, you don't send your cardiac, your heart surgeon into the operating room, after 16 weeks, and lives are on the line there. And, police officers are faced with these life and death decisions. So we've got to make sure that we're supporting them, we're funding you in our academy settings, communities, that we don't continue to overtask and underfund, which that's a whole nother podcast in and of itself. But at the core of all these things, it comes down to the individual and their ability to manage themselves and make good decisions under tremendous amount of stress, emotional regulation. And the model, and that, the old model is do it because I said so, because this is the way we've always done it. You're right. We're only going to be setting up officers for failure with that type of mindset. We've got to take modern science, modern learning methods, and adapt to the world that we're in today. And I think you're doing a great job. One of the questions that I wanted to ask, and this is just one of my questions for everybody, in that spirit of being a lifelong learner, is what's the latest book that you've read? And I think you just mentioned a Chip and Dan Heath book, Make It Stick. Fantastic book, by the way. It's been a long time since I read it, but that is a great book. So you want to stick with that one, or do you want to go with a different book?
No, it was dry, but it was it was good stuff.
Drive, yeah. Daniel Pink.
I just opened it, but Malcolm Gladwell has a book called Talking to Strangers. And again, I've not gotten into it deeply, but he has a philosophy. It's called the default to truth. Default to truth says that there are certain axioms in the world that we have to agree, or the world just doesn't happen right. And his example was, you send your 7-year-old on the bus, and then you turn them loose. And the theory is that within 20 minutes, the bus driver is going to get your child to the main door of the school. They're going to know the direction how to get there. They're not going to be drunk, and things happen well. And then they come pick them up in the afternoon. And I think, we go to the grocery, we buy a dozen eggs. We assume they're fresh. We assume there's 12 of them in there, and we assume they're from a chicken. So there are certain truths in life that we have to abide by. And that was my point earlier about staying in your lane. If you stay in your lane and your default to truth, you take care of your business. The police are here to help you. We're public servants. We'll come and we won't make things worse for you. And you drive the speed limit. And when you've got a red light, you don't just go because you're in a hurry. So certain things in life, these truths have to happen. And I think that's part of the world's problems. We're not accountable. If it doesn't feel good, taste good, or you like it, then I don't have to follow the rules. Well, you do have to follow the rules. And that's part of the world's accountability problem in my mind. So I'm anxious to see what Malcolm has to say about the rest of the default to truths.
Well, if everybody followed the rules, we wouldn't have a job, right? What would the need for policing be in America?
Your point's taken. So the point left. So do what you're supposed to do, stay out of harm's way, and then have the police job become not unnecessary, because we're all doing what we're supposed to do. I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see.
Well, we can always hope, right? We can dream big.
That's right.
Trust
Well,
but
it was my
verify.
pleasure. I'm grateful for the chance, and thanks for what you're doing.
No, I really appreciate you spending a few moments with us. Where I think I've been taking some notes along the way here, so it's like this could be like a 10-part episode. But I appreciate everything that you're doing and your staff is doing at the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy, and for all of our academies across the country. That's really where we shape the future of policing, and it's it's a big task. It's a lot of responsibility, and I know that the staffs of these academies inside their departments, they also, they feel the, that pain and of loss and sorrow when we lose police officers. Unfortunately, we've lost a few here in a few recent weeks here in our own state of Indiana. But I'm just truly appreciative of the people that are willing to spend their time, their expertise, bring all those years of experience and impart that wisdom on our police officers that quite frankly are the future. It's a tough job, it's a dangerous job, and somebody's got to do it. And so I've just, to me, makes my heart swell with pride whenever I see all the good things and happening, and even in these tragedies, knowing that we have women and men that are willing to step into that breach and take on those challenges on behalf of their communities and behalf of our country. So thanks again, and you have a great day. And
all right, my pleasure. Well, thank you. Thanks for your time, and thanks for serving on our training board, and God bless the police all over the country.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Going to axoncoaching.com, check us out, and contact us today. Until our next episode, I'm 1042.